In the winter of 1942, while the world burned under the Blitzkrieg and the Atlantic bled convoys, a tiny team of British commandos slipped across the Channel on a mission so secret it was never written down in the official war diary. Their target, the fortress of Ile-de-Saint-Marc, a 17th-century Vauban star fort built on a jagged tidal island off the Brittany coast, 3 miles west of Saint-Malo. For 2 years, the Germans had turned it into a heavily defended coastal battery, part of the Atlantic Wall. Intelligence reported 4 155mm guns, a garrison of 180 Kriegsmarine artillerymen, and a new experimental long-range radar set that was playing havoc with RAF bomber streams heading for the Ruhr. The job of No. 4 Commando Detachment, 12 men under Captain Ian Drummond, was to land by Folbot at low tide, scale the seaward wall, neutralize the guns, destroy the radar, and exfiltrate before dawn. A textbook raid, except nothing about St. Mark was ever textbook. The French locals had refused to go near the island since the 1790s. Fishermen swore the fortress was cursed after revolutionary troops massacred a monastery of Carmelite monks inside its walls. During the First World War, the French army used it as a punishment barracks. Deserters and shell-shocked poilus were sent there for weeks, and the suicide rate was so high, the place was quietly abandoned in 1917. The Germans, desperate for coastal strongpoints, ignored the stories. They shouldn't have. What follows is compiled from the surviving testimony of 3 commandos who made it back, declassified SOE fragments, and one redacted MI9 escape report, and a single reel-to-reel tape discovered in Captain Drummond's footlocker in 1987. Names of the living have been changed. Everything else is exactly as they told it. This is Operation Midnight, and whatever walked the barracks of St. Mark in December 1942 never left. Chapter 1. The crossing testimony of Corporal Daniel Danny Kerr, No. 4 Commando, recorded 1984. We left the motor gun boat somewhere off Point d'Arras in pitch black and sleet that felt like birdshot against the face. 12 of us, 6 folding canoes, 2 men to a boat. Captain Drummond and Sergeant McAllister led. I paddled No. 3 with Trooper Rhys Evans, a quiet Welsh lad who never swore unless he was terrified. Tonight, he was praying under his breath in Welsh the whole way. The plan was clean on paper: ride the ebb tide to the rocks under the northeast bastion of the fortress of Ile-de-Saint-Marc, climb the seaward wall with toggles and manila, split into fire teams, wreck the guns and the new radar set, and be gone before first light. A classic commando raid. We had done half a dozen already that year. This one felt different the moment the island rose out of the dark. It wasn't just the silence. The sea itself seemed to hush as we closed the last mile. No gulls, no breakers echoing off the cliffs. Not even the slap of paddles sounded right. Rhys stopped stroking for a second and whispered, "It's listening, Danny. The whole bloody island is listening." I told him to keep paddling or I'd shove the blade somewhere painful. We beached on black shingle that crunched like broken glass. While we dragged the fullbods above the weed line and threw cam nets over them, the moon slid out from behind a cloud for just long enough to show us what we were up against. The fortress loomed above us, a perfect Vauban star fort, black stone walls rising sheer from the rocks, gun embrasures staring down like empty sockets. Every light inside was dead, not a glow, not a cigarette spark from a sentry. For a garrison of nearly 200 Kriegsmarine gunners, that was wrong in a way that made the hairs on my neck stand up. We went up the wall in 2 sticks. I was first man on the left-hand rope. Halfway up, my toggle slipped. The stone was coated in something slicker and warmer than seawater. When I hauled myself over the parapet, I looked at my glove. It came away black and wet. The smell hit me a second later, old blood and iron. I wiped it on my smock and told myself it was gull mess or seaweed. We regrouped in the deep shadow of Bastion Saint-Michel. The courtyard stretched in front of us, wide enough to parade a battalion. 4 big 155s parked in a neat row. Barracks blocked 3 stories high on the far side. The air stank of low tide and something sweeter underneath, like meat gone off. The cold was brutal, the kind that sinks straight through wool and flesh and sits on your heart. Captain Drummond gave the whisper. Silent kills only until the guns go up. No rifles until his word. We moved off in bounds, blackened faces, weapons slung tight so nothing rattled. 10 paces in, we heard it. One clear piano note low on the keyboard, hanging in the freezing air like it had been waiting for us. Then nothing. Reese froze mid-step. I could see the whites of his eyes. I shook my head once, keep moving. We had taken maybe another 5 paces when every light in the fortress snapped on at once. Floodlights on the walls, windows blazing orange, the whole courtyard lit up like Wembley Stadium. We dropped flat behind a gunwheel, hearts hammering, waiting for the MG-34s to open up, for the shouts, for the alarm bell. Nothing came. Just bright light, and that piano again, now playing a slow, stumbling waltz, as if someone who had forgotten how was remembering note by note. 5 full minutes we lay there. No sentries appeared. No one even looked out a window. The lights stayed on. The piano kept playing. Then, as suddenly as they had come on, the lights died. The music cut off mid-bar. The temperature plummeted. I felt it in my bones. Breath plumed white in front of my face, though no one was breathing hard anymore. Sergeant McAllister's voice came low from my left. "This place is fucking haunted, sir." Drummond's answer was barely a whisper, but it shook. "Can it, Sergeant? Eyes sharp. Move." We rose and started. Across the courtyard again. Behind us, somewhere deep inside the barracks, the piano began once more. Faster this time, almost frantic. I knew then we weren't raiding a German battery anymore. We had just walked into something that had been waiting a very long time for fresh sentries. Chapter 2. The barracks testimony of Lance Corporal Tom Ginger Walsh, Demolition Team, recorded 1991. Fire Team Bravo, me, Trooper Levine, and Trooper Campbell drew the short straw. Clear the garrison barracks, locate the duty guard, silent kill, then plant charges in the ground floor ammunition store. Simple in the briefing hut at Troon. Not so simple when the oak main door of the barracks stood wide open and swinging, though there wasn't a breath of wind. I took point. Inside hit you like walking into a butcher's cold room that had been shut up for years. Damp stone, candle wax, and that same sweet rot stink we'd smelled in the courtyard, only thicker, clinging to the back of your throat. The corridor ran straight for 50 yards, doors either side, a faint orange flicker coming from the stairwell at the far end. We moved down the center, spaced 5 yards, boots trying to be quiet on warped oak boards that creaked anyway. Halfway along, I saw the blood. Brown handprints on the wallpaper at waist height, long dragging streaks like someone had been hauled backwards by the ankles. Old blood, flaking when I brushed it. Above the prints, every flower in the faded French wallpaper had been scratched out with a bayonet or a knife. Thousands of them. Someone had taken weeks to do it. Levine tapped my shoulder and pointed up. Someone had written on the ceiling in foot-high charcoal letters, "Il n'y a pas de paix ici." There is no peace here. We reached the stairwell. Candles, dozens of thick black candles burned on every step going up. Wax pooled and hardened in layers like the place had been used for midnight mass every night for a century. Campbell muttered, "This isn't a barracks. It's a bleeding crypt." We started climbing. The piano note we'd heard outside was louder in here, coming from the first floor landing. We edged up, weapons ready. There it was, an upright Bechstein, lid open, keys, yellowed keys, sheet music on the stand. No one at the stool. The last chord was still depressed, like invisible fingers had just lifted off. I stepped closer. The title on the sheet music was Valse des Âmes Perdues, Waltz of the Lost Souls. I'd never heard of it before or since. I reached out to touch middle C. Curious in spite of myself. The instant my finger was an inch from the key, every candle on the stairs blew out at once. Pitch black, then breathing, wet, heavy, right behind my neck. I spun Fairbairn Sykes already out. Nothing there. The breathing moved, passed between the three of us like a man walking through the line, carrying the stink of cheap shag tobacco and wet greatcoats. Levine panicked and let off a 3-round burst from his Thompson. The muzzle flash lit the landing for half a heartbeat. In that half heartbeat, I saw them. 2 perfect ranks of French First World War infantry in horizon blue, greatcoats rotting off them, standing shoulder to shoulder along both walls, eyes milky white, mouths sewn shut with black bootlaces. Then darkness again. We bolted upstairs, blind, crashing off walls. Second floor was the sleeping quarters, triple bunks in long rows, German blankets tucked with hospital corners. Every bunk occupied. I grabbed the nearest sleeper by the shoulder to roll him out. The uniform was warm, but when it turned over, it was empty. Just a flattened gray shell, cap still on the pillow, no body inside. I checked the next. Same. The next. All of them. 200 empty uniforms lying in perfect order like they were waiting for inspection. The piano started again downstairs. Same waltz, only faster now, almost frantic. At the exact same moment, every empty uniform on the bunk sat bolt upright. Sleeves reached out, collars turned as if heads were still inside them. The whole dormitory began to stand. We ran for the back stairwell that led down to the ammo store. Behind us came the sound of boots hitting the floorboards in perfect unison. Not running, marching. I risked one look back. The corridor was full of gray shapes wearing the uniforms, faces nothing but black hollows, advancing in step with the piano. Something cold and impossibly strong clamped round Campbell's ankle. He went down screaming. Levine and I grabbed his webbing and hauled, but whatever had him wasn't letting go. In the end, the boot and half his foot stayed behind. We dragged what was left of him down the stairs, slammed the iron door to the magazine, and wedged a 155mm crate against it. The marching stopped outside. Silence. Then 3 polite knocks. A calm, educated voice on the other side spoke in German first, then switched to English with barely an accent. "English comrades, come out. It is time for guard duty." We looked at each other, blood roaring in our ears, and started wiring the charges anyway. 30-minute time pencils. We had 28 minutes to live unless we could find another way out. Whatever was on the other side of that door, it could wait. It had been waiting since 1793. It could wait a little longer. Chapter 3. The Guns That Fired Backwards Testimony of Sergeant Alistair McAllister, No. 4 Commando, recorded 1989. Fire Team Alpha, Captain Drummond, Trooper Shaw, and me had the guns. 4 French 155mm K-418s, big bastards, sitting on their concrete traverses in the main battery. Our job was simple. 2 pounds of plastic 808 on each breech. Nobel primers on the shell stacks, time pencils, and away. 40 minutes work at most. Except the guns weren't facing the sea anymore. Every barrel had been rotated 180 on its mount. Muzzles pointed inland, straight at the barracks block, like they were expecting an attack from inside the fortress itself. Shaw saw it first. "Sarge," he whispered, "they're afraid of something behind them, not in front." Drummond told him to stow it and get the explosives out. We climbed the nearest emplacement. The gun crew were still there. 6 Kriegsmarine lads in gray sweaters, sitting in a tight circle around a paraffin lamp, playing cards. They didn't look up when our boots hit the platform. I stepped in and slid my fighting knife into the neck of the nearest one, just under the ear, the way they taught us at Achnacary. Blade went in smooth as butter, but no blood, no jerk, nothing. The body slumped forward, yet the uniform stayed sitting upright, cards still pinched between gloved fingers. I pulled the collar open, empty, just a deflated shell. Drummond hissed, "Ignore it, work fast." We slapped the charges on the breech, molded the plastic like putty, inserted the primers. I was crimping the last time pencil when the gun began to traverse on its own. Slow hydraulic whine, deliberate, like it knew exactly what it was doing. The long barrel swung until it pointed dead center at the barracks windows. Then it elevated a few degrees, depressed a few, hunting. All 4 guns did the same thing at once. Perfect synchronization, no crew touching the wheels. Shaw dropped his haversack and started muttering the Lord's Prayer in a Glasgow accent thick enough to spread on bread. Drummond slapped him quiet. We finished the charges, crushed the copper tubes on the pencils, and turned to leave. That was when every floodlight in the fortress snapped on again, harsh white beams sweeping the courtyard. The entire garrison was down there, close to 200 men, standing in perfect parade formation 3 ranks deep facing the guns. Field gray uniforms spotless, hands by sides, chins up. Not one of them moved. Not one of them breathed. Just black holes where eyes should have been, their mouths open together. Same word, over and over, flat and dead. "Feuer! Feuer! Feuer!" The guns answered. All 4 155s fired at once. Recoil slammed the carriages back against their stops. The noise inside the fortress was apocalyptic. Shells punched straight through the east wing of the barracks at point-blank range, stone exploding outward in orange fireballs. The shockwave knocked us flat on the platform, but the men in the courtyard never flinched. They just kept chanting "Feuer" as the breaches opened by themselves. Shells rose out of the ready racks. No hands on them floated through the air and slid home. The guns elevated again. Second salvo, third, fourth. The entire east wing collapsed in on itself, roof falling in slow motion, dust and flame boiling up into the night sky. Still the gray ranks stood there, untouched by flying stone or burning debris, still chanting. I grabbed Drummond's arm. "Sir, we have to move." He stared down at the courtyard like he was looking into hell itself. Then he nodded once, sharp. We ran, jumping from emplacement to emplacement, making sure every charge was live. Behind us, the guns kept firing, methodical, patient, like they had all the ammunition in the world and nothing but time. As we dropped off the last platform, I looked back. The barrels were traversing again, this time tracking something we couldn't see, swinging toward the keep. The chanting had stopped. The ranks were breaking formation, turning inland, marching toward the chapel under the main tower, boots ringing on the cobbles in perfect time. The guns followed them with their muzzles, patient as hunting dogs. I didn't wait to see what happened when they caught up. We ran for the rally point, the whole fortress shaking with each silent green flash from the burning barracks. Whatever those guns were shooting at now, it wasn't us, but it had noticed we were there, and it was coming. Chapter 4. The chapel under the keep testimony of Corporal Daniel Danny Kerr continued. We linked up near the sally port. 9 of us left. Campbell was gray-faced, tourniquet high on his thigh, half his foot still back in the dormitory. Levine kept muttering numbers, counting heartbeats or rounds I never asked. Shaw was praying out loud now, Glasgow vowels echoing off the stone. The rest of us just breathed frost and listened to the guns pounding the barracks into dust. Our radios were useless. Every time we keyed the handset, we got the same thing. A French voice, calm and priestly, reciting the Confiter in Latin over and over, like a stuck record. Drummond clicked the set off and looked at the sea. Tide had turned while we were inside. The causeway was already under 6 inches of black water and rising fast. Our full-bots were matchwood on the rocks. Only one way out now, straight through the fortress, out the main gate, across the causeway before it vanished. Drummond traced the route on the ground with his gloved finger. Shortest line ran under the keep itself, through the old monastery chapel the monks had built before Vauban ever laid a stone. None of us liked it. Every fisherman from Saint-Malo to Roscoff knew the story. 1793, the terror. Carmelite brothers dragged from their cells, heads struck off on the altar steps, bodies bricked up behind the reredos. The place had been locked ever since. Even the Boche hadn't touched it. We had no choice. The entrance was a low archway beside the guardhouse, iron-bound door hanging off one hinge, pitch black inside. We flicked on the hooded torches we carried for map reading. The beams picked out stone steps spiraling down, worn into scoops by centuries of bare feet. The air changed the moment we crossed the threshold. Warmer, thick, tasting of candle smoke and old incense. The smell you get in a church when the thuribles just been swung. 20 steps down, the passage narrowed, walls sweating moisture. Someone had scratched crosses into the stone every few inches, hundreds of them, some fresh enough that the tool marks were still white. The bottom another door, oak again, split with age. It opened without a sound when Drummond pushed. The chapel was bigger than I expected. Barrel vaulted ceiling, ribs painted faded red and gold. A stone altar still stood at the far end, cloth rotted to threads, but the crucifix above it intact. 13 monks knelt in a perfect semicircle facing the altar, brown habits, hoods up, hands clasped. They had been kneeling like that for 150 years. You could tell because their heads sat in a neat row on the flagstones in front of them, facing the same direction, mouths open in silent screaming, beards still attached. The bodies hadn't fallen over. They just knelt there, headless, steady as statues. Black candles burned all around them, tall as a man's arm, flames perfectly still, though we could feel no draft. The wax ran red. In front of the altar stood a German officer, captain's tabs, long black leather coat, peaked cap tucked under one arm. He was reading aloud from a small leather-bound book, Latin but backwards, every word reversed like a mirror. Each time he finished a line, the kneeling monks swayed slightly, as if nodding agreement. He looked up when our torch beams hit him, smiled like a host greeting late guests. "You are late for Mass, gentlemen," he said in perfect English. "Please, take a place in the circle." Drummond didn't answer with words. He brought his Thompson up and fired half a magazine center mass. The impacts punched holes in the leather coat. No blood. The holes closed like water. The officer brushed imaginary dust from his chest and kept smiling. Behind him, the headless monks turned their necks toward us. Slowly, all at once, Levine screamed something in Yiddish. Shaw's Sten started chattering. Bullets spanged off stone, chipped candle wax, passed straight through habits and leather alike. I saw one round take the German captain clean through the throat. The hole sealed before the casing hit the floor. Drummond yelled, "Grenade!" I yanked the pin on my last gammon bomb, 2 pounds of 808 with nuts and bolts taped round it, and lobbed it overarm. We ducked back through the doorway as the flash banged white and the pressure wave punched us down the steps. When the dust settled, we risked a look. The chapel was empty. No monks, no officer, no book. Just the 13 heads still staring at the foot of the altar, eyes wide, mouths working silently, and every black candle still burning straight up, flames unmoved by the blast. We didn't wait for an encore, we ran. Behind us, soft as a lullaby, the backwards Latin started again. Chapter 5. The Causeway testimony of Sergeant Alistair McAllister continued. The barracks magazine went up right on schedule. Massive orange bloom, followed by a string of secondaries that lit the sky like noon. Half the fortress simply ceased to exist in a roar of stone and fire. For one heartbeat, we thought the blast might have ended whatever was in there with us. It hadn't. The fire burned, but it made no noise, no crackle, no hiss. Just silent green-white flame licking up black walls. We sprinted for the main gate, 9 men carrying one, Campbell slung between Levine and Shaw, leaving a dark trail. The courtyard was ankle-deep in spent cartridges that hadn't been there minutes earlier. They crunched under our boots like hail. We burst through the gatehouse arch and onto the causeway. Half a mile of narrow cobblestone that linked the island to the mainland at low tide. Water already lapped the edges and rose fast. Moonlight on the flood made the stones look like the spine of some half-submerged beast. Behind us, the marching began. Thousands of boots striking stone in perfect time, slow, deliberate, patient. I didn't want to look, but you always look. They were coming out the gate in column of 4s, French poilus in horizon blue beside German sailors in pea jackets, monks in brown habits mixed among them, all marching shoulder to shoulder. No rifles, no helmets, just black hollow faces turned toward us. Leading the column walked the German captain from the chapel, lantern in his left hand burning steady green, smiling like a parade marshal. The piano started again, same damned waltz, but now it was right beside us, inside the ears, inside the skull. No instrument in sight, just the music, louder with every step we took. That was when the lads began walking off the causeway, not panicking, not slipping, walking. Calm, eyes forward, like they were answering a whistle only they could hear. Levine went first, let go of Campbell, turned 90 degrees, and stepped off the stones into the black water without breaking stride. Sank like a sack of bricks. Campbell screamed his name once, then followed, dragging his ruined leg. Shaw dropped his steam, smiled at me like he'd just remembered a joke, and walked off the other side. I grabbed Drummond by the webbing. "Sir, we have to run." He stared past me at the column. Hundreds of them now, still marching, still pouring out the gate, filling the causeway behind us. The green lantern floated 10 feet above the captain's head, lighting nothing and everything. Drummond's mouth moved. I think he said, "There's nowhere left, Sergeant." I hit him. Full fist right on the point of the jaw. He went to one knee, eyes clearing for a second. I hauled him up, hooked an arm under his shoulders, and started dragging him along the stones. Every yard felt like a mile. The piano pounded inside my head, promising rest, promising the war was over if I'd just stop and stand at ease. Water was knee-deep in the middle of the causeway. Fog rolled in thick as wool. I lost sight of the column, lost sight of the island, lost sight of everything except the next cobblestone under my boots and Drummond's dead weight over my shoulder. The music faded only when my feet hit dry sand. Fog peeled away like theater curtains. Dawn was breaking, cold and pink over the dunes near Plouscat. I looked back. The fortress still burned on the horizon, but the flames were green and perfectly silent. The causeway was gone, swallowed by the tide. Nothing moved on the water except gulls. 2 of us out of 12. Drummond came round while I was binding his jaw with a field dressing. First thing he said was, "Did we get the radar, Sergeant?" I told him the radar was the least of our worries. He nodded once, then stared out to sea for a long time. When he said, "They'll want a report," I laughed. Couldn't help it, sounded like a dying crow. Far out on the water, the green lantern winked once, twice, then went dark. We never heard the piano again while we were awake, but both of us heard it in dreams for the rest of our lives. Chapter 6. The tape voice of Captain Ian Drummond, recorded on a domestic reel-to-reel machine in his study, 17th of March 1988, 3 nights before he put his service Webley in his mouth and pulled the trigger. I've never told the full truth. Not to the debrief at Combined Ops, not to the psychiatrist they sent round in 46, not even to Mary when the nightmares had her sleeping in the spare room. But the tape doesn't lie, and it will outlive me. Whatever we walked into on St. Mark wasn't a German garrison, it was the fortress itself. The stones there have soaked up blood since the 17th century. Monks in 1793, deserters court-martialed against the wall in 1917, sailors who hanged themselves from the flagpole because the screaming in the barracks never stopped. Every death left a stain deeper than powder burns. After enough stains, the walls started to remember. Then they started to keep. Hauptmann Klaus Ritter, the officer in the chapel, wasn't there to command a battery. He was SS Ahnenerbe, an occult archaeologist. His orders, recovered after the war from a safe in Wewelsburg, were to awaken and direct the guardian entity of the site for the defense of the Reich. He thought he could bargain with it. He offered it fresh souls, British commandos, in exchange for service. The fortress accepted the offer. Then it took Ritter and every man under his command as down payment. We were the interest. I still see it when I close my eyes. The ranks marching out the gate, French and German side by side, monks mixed in, all wearing the same empty face. They weren't ghosts in the normal sense. They were uniforms with duty still in them. The island won't release a man until someone else takes his place on the roster. That's why the guns turned inland. That's why the piano only plays when new sentries arrive. That's why the candles never go out. I kept one round in my Webley all these years, the same pistol I carried that night. I told Mary it was for burglars. Truth is, some mornings I wake up standing at the bedroom window in full marching order, webbing tight, boots laced, listening for a bugle that never sounds. When the day comes that I walk out the door and head west without knowing why, I'll use the round on myself before I reach the sea. If you're listening to this, I'm already gone. Do not go to Ile de Saint-Marc. Do not sail within sight of it on a falling tide. Do not read the names carved inside the chapel wall. The fortress is quiet now. It is full, but it always has room for one more relief. Chapter 7. What Remains? Narration present day. The official war diary of No. 4 Commando records that on the night of 11/12, December 1942, a detachment under Captain I.R. Drummond raided the coastal battery on Ile de Saint-Marc, destroyed the experimental radar set and 2 155mm guns, and withdrew under fire with the loss of 9 men killed. Both Drummond and Sergeant McAllister were awarded immediate distinguished service orders. The citation praises conspicuous gallantry in the face of the enemy. There is no mention of pianos, headless monks, or artillery that fired on its own garrison. After the war, the French government declared the island a danger zone. In 1958, the Marine Nationale used it for live-fire exercises. The remaining walls were breached, the magazines collapsed, the chapel roof blown in. What was left was abandoned to gulls and salt. Yet the 4 guns are still there. You can see them on satellite imagery if you know where to look. Barrels turned inland, exactly as we left them. In October 1974, a company of French naval fusiliers Marins conducted a night infiltration exercise on the ruins. 12 men inserted by Zodiac at dusk. At dawn, 3 staggered onto the beach near Cancale, barefoot, uniforms soaked in blood that wasn't theirs. They were debriefed in a sealed room at Lorient. Their statements remain classified secret défense to this day. The exercise was never repeated once more in 1981. After that, Saint-Marc was quietly erased from French naval charts. I went myself in the summer of 2021. A Breton fisherman, old enough to remember the war, took me out at dawn for €200 and a bottle of Calvados. He refused to landfall. We drifted half a mile off while the tide fell. Through binoculars, the fortress looked like a broken jaw against the sky. Grass grows in perfect regimental squares across the old parade ground. The burned east wing is black stone, laced with ivy. And in the middle of the rubble, I saw something glint. Later, when the fisherman let me borrow his dinghy on the slack tide, I rowed in alone. The silence was total. Even the gulls wouldn't land. I walked the courtyard once, boots crunching on spent 303 casings that should have rusted away 80 years ago. In the ruins of the barracks, I found a single British brass cartridge case, 1942 head stamp. It was warm to the touch, as though it had been fired minutes earlier. I left it where it lay. On the chapel wall, beneath centuries of lichen, fresh scratches spell the same sentence in 3 languages. I'll nigh a pas de paix. I see no peace here. Cana rue higher. Some duties never end. Some garrisons are never relieved. The fortress waits, patient as stone, for the next tide that brings boots on the shingle and new names for the roster. And somewhere inside the broken walls, on nights when the wind is from the west, fishermen off San Malo still lower their voices and cross themselves when they hear a piano playing a waltz no living man wrote. The guard mounts again tonight. It always does.